The transport ship landed with a heavy thud on Station Orion 7. Una Park stood near the exit door, her small bag hanging from her shoulder. She was 24 years old, stood only 5 feet and 2 inches tall, and weighed less than most of the equipment the other recruits carried. Her black hair was tied back in a simple ponytail, and her dark eyes watched everything around her with quiet attention. When the door opened, she stepped out onto the metal platform. The air smelled strange, like chemicals and something burned. Around her, dozens of alien recruits walked toward the massive building ahead. This was the Galactic Coalition Military Academy, the most famous training center for beast handlers in the entire galaxy. Una was the first human ever accepted into the elite beast handler division. She walked slowly, taking in everything she saw. The aliens around her were all different. Some were tall and covered in scales. Some had 4 arms and moved like insects. Others were massive, with thick skin like stone. They all looked strong. They all looked dangerous. And they all looked at her like she was a mistake. A group of Velthari soldiers stopped in front of her. They were reptilian creatures, standing over 7 feet tall with green scales and yellow eyes. Their leader stepped forward. His name badge read, Commander Rovik. "This is the human?" Rovik said. His voice was deep and cold. He looked down at Una like she was a small bug. "This tiny thing wants to handle military beasts?" The other Velthari laughed. One of them poked Una's shoulder with a clawed finger. "Careful," he said. "She might break." Una did not move. She did not speak. She simply looked at Commander Rovik with calm eyes and waited. Rovik leaned closer. His breath smelled like meat. "Listen to me, little prey. You do not belong here. Humans are weak. Humans are soft. You will fail, and when you do, I will personally send you back to your pathetic planet." He straightened up and walked away, his soldiers following behind him. Their laughter echoed across the platform. Una picked up her bag and continued walking toward the Academy. Inside the main building, a Nixari officer was giving orientation to new recruits. The Nixari were elegant creatures with 4 arms and large compound eyes. They moved with grace and spoke with soft, clicking voices. "Welcome to the Beast Handler Division," the officer said. "Here, you will learn to bond with the most dangerous creatures in the galaxy. You will train them for war. You will fight beside them, and many of you will die." The recruits stood in rows, listening. Una was placed at the very back, behind everyone else. She was so short that she could barely see the officer. "Bonding with a military beast is not about strength," the officer continued. "It is about connection, about trust, about understanding the creature you are working with." Una felt a small spark of hope. Maybe here, size did not matter so much. But then the officer looked directly at her. "However, some species are simply not suited for this work. Humans, for example, are known to be emotionally unstable and physically fragile. The Coalition has accepted 1 human recruit as an experiment. We shall see if this experiment succeeds or fails." More laughter. More stares. Una kept her face blank and said nothing. After orientation, recruits were assigned to squads. Una was placed with 2 aliens. The first was Kira, a female Velthari with dark green scales and a permanent scowl on her face. The second was Tarek, a Gorvan male who stood nearly 8 feet tall and was built like a living mountain. Neither of them wanted her. "I refuse to train with a human," Kira said to the assignment officer. "She will slow us down. She will get us killed." Tarek simply grunted and crossed his massive arms. His silence said everything. The officer shook his head. "Assignments are final. You will work together, or you will all fail together." Kira glared at Una with hatred in her eyes. "Stay out of my way, human. If you cause problems, I will crush you myself." Yuna nodded slowly. I understand. That night, Yuna sat alone in her small room. It was barely larger than a closet, with a thin bed and a single window that looked out at the stars. She could hear the other recruits laughing and talking in the halls. No one invited her to join them. She pulled out a small photograph from her bag. It showed her family back on Earth, her mother, her father, and her younger brother. They were all smiling. Her mother had tears in her eyes the day Yuna left. Come back to us, her mother had said. Promise me you will come back. Yuna had promised. She intended to keep that promise. She put the photograph away and lay down on her bed. Tomorrow, the real training would begin. Tomorrow, she would have to prove that she deserved to be here. The next morning, all recruits gathered in a massive hall. Commander Rovik stood on a raised platform, his yellow eyes scanning the crowd. Listen carefully, he said. You have 30 days to bond with a military beast. If you fail to bond, you will be expelled from the academy. There are no second chances. There are no exceptions. He smiled, showing rows of sharp teeth. The beasts you will bond with come from the planet Karin. This planet is home to the deadliest predators in the galaxy. Some of you will bond with powerful creatures. Some of you will bond with weaker ones. And some of you will die trying. The recruits murmured nervously. Yuna stayed silent. Rovik continued. The beasts are kept in the containment facility below this building. You will visit them starting today. Choose wisely. Your beast will determine your future. As the recruits began to leave, Yuna heard whispers behind her. Did you hear about the creature on the lowest level? The Shadowfang? Yes, they say it has killed every handler who tried to bond with it. No species has ever tamed one. It is pure death. Why do they even keep it alive? Who knows? Maybe they hope someone will eventually succeed. Yuna listened carefully. A creature that no one could tame. A beast that killed everyone who approached it. Something about that interested her. As she walked toward the containment facility, Commander Rovik appeared beside her. He grabbed her arm with his clawed hand and squeezed hard enough to hurt. I know what you are thinking, human, he said quietly. Forget about the Shadowfang. It is not for creatures like you. It will eat you in one bite. He released her arm and walked away. Yuna rubbed the spot where his claws had dug into her skin. Small drops of blood appeared on her uniform. She looked toward the containment facility. Somewhere down there, in the deepest level, a monster was waiting, and Yuna Park was very curious to meet it. The containment facility was cold and dark. Long hallways stretched in every direction, lined with heavy metal doors. Behind each door was a cage. Inside each cage was a monster. Yuna walked through the upper levels with the other recruits. Officers guided them past different beasts, explaining what each creature could do. This is a thornback, one officer said, pointing at a massive armored creature. It had thick plates covering its body and spikes running down its spine. Excellent for defensive combat. Very loyal once bonded. Kira smiled. She had already chosen this beast for herself. The thornback seemed to respond to her confidence, pressing its head against the cage bars when she approached. And this, the officer continued, moving to the next cage, is a siege crawler. The creature inside was the size of a small vehicle. It had 12 legs, powerful jaws, and skin like stone. Torek grinned with approval. This beast matched his size and strength perfectly. As the tour continued, Yuna noticed that no one showed her any creatures. No officer approached her. No one explained anything to her. She was simply ignored. Finally, after everyone else had selected their beasts, Commander Rovik appeared with a small cage in his hands. Human, he called out. Come here. Yuna walked over. The other recruits gathered around to watch. Rovik set the cage on the ground and opened it. Inside was a creature no bigger than a house cat. It was thin and pale, with dull eyes and weak movements. It looked sick. "This is a driftworm," Rovik said. "It is used for basic scouting. No combat ability. No strength. No value." He kicked the cage lightly. The driftworm flinched and curled into a ball. "This is the perfect beast for you," Rovik said with a cruel smile. "Weak and useless, just like all humans." The other recruits laughed. Kira crossed her arms and smirked. Even Torek let out a low chuckle. Yuna looked at the trembling creature for a long moment. Then she bent down and gently lifted it from the cage. The driftworm was cold and shaking, but it did not try to escape. It simply looked at her with its dull eyes. "Thank you," Yuna said quietly. "I accept." She walked away while the laughter continued behind her. That night, Yuna took care of the driftworm in her room. She fed it, cleaned it, and made a small bed for it from her extra clothes. The creature seemed surprised by her kindness. After a few hours, it stopped shaking and fell asleep peacefully. Yuna watched it for a while. Then she made a decision. She waited until the station was quiet. Most recruits were sleeping. The officers had finished their patrols. Only a few security guards remained, and they were far from the lower levels. Yuna slipped out of her room and made her way to the containment facility. She moved silently through the empty hallways, avoiding cameras and guards. Her heart beat fast, but her steps were steady. She went down, past the first level, past the second, past the third. Each level was darker and colder than the one before. The cages here held larger creatures, more dangerous ones. Warning signs covered every wall. Finally, she reached the lowest level. There was only one cage here. It was massive, taking up half the room. The walls around it were reinforced with extra metal. The energy barrier glowed bright blue, and behind that barrier was the Shadowfang. Yuna stopped breathing for a moment. The creature was enormous. It stood at least 12 feet tall, with black scales that seemed to absorb all light. It had 6 eyes arranged in 2 rows, all of them glowing red. Its claws were like long blades, and its mouth was filled with teeth the size of daggers. It was the most terrifying thing Yuna had ever seen, and it was looking directly at her. The Shadowfang let out a low growl that made the floor vibrate. It pressed against the energy barrier, its claws scraping against the invisible wall. Sparks flew where it touched. Yuna stood frozen. Every instinct told her to run. Every part of her body screamed that she was going to die. But she did not run. Instead, she sat down on the cold floor, about 10 feet from the barrier. She crossed her legs, placed her hands on her knees, and simply looked at the creature. The Shadowfang snarled. It slammed its body against the barrier. The room shook. Warning lights flashed. Yuna did not move. She came back the next night. And the night after that. And the night after that. Each time, she did the same thing. She sat quietly, made no sudden movements, and just watched. She did not try to touch the creature. She did not try to give it commands. She did not show fear. On the 5th night, she learned the creature's name. She found old records in a forgotten computer terminal. The Shadowfang was called Vex. He had been captured 10 years ago. During that time, 15 handlers had tried to bond with him. All 15 were dead. The reports described Vex as violent, mindless, and impossible to control. But as Yuna read more, she noticed something strange. Every handler had used force. They had tried to dominate Vex with weapons, pain, and fear. No one had ever tried kindness. Yuna went deeper into the old files. She found research about Shadowfangs from before the war. They were pack hunters who lived in family groups. They were highly intelligent. They bonded through trust and loyalty, not through violence. The Coalition had been treating Vex like a mindless monster. But he was not mindless at all. He was alone, afraid, and angry. He had been tortured for 10 years by people who did not understand him. Yuna closed the files and sat in silence for a long time. The next night, she brought something with her. It was a piece of meat she had saved from the cafeteria. She placed it on the floor near the energy barrier and stepped back. Vex watched her suspiciously. He did not move toward the food. Yuna sat down and waited. After an hour, Vex slowly moved forward. He sniffed the meat. Then, keeping his eyes on Yuna, he ate it. She smiled softly. Nights turned into weeks. Yuna visited Vex every night without fail. She brought him food. She talked to him in a quiet voice, telling him about her day, about Earth, about her family. She never tried to touch him. Slowly, Vex began to change. He stopped growling when she appeared. He stopped slamming against the barrier. He began to sit near the edge of his cage, as close to her as he could get. Sometimes, he would make soft sounds, almost like he was trying to talk back to her. One night, Yuna noticed something that made her heart stop. Vex was wagging his tail. It was small. Just a tiny movement. But it was real. She felt tears forming in her eyes. This monster that everyone called impossible to tame, this creature that had killed 15 people, was happy to see her. On the final night before the bonding ceremony, Yuna stood up and walked toward the barrier. Her heart was pounding. Her hands were shaking. Vex watched her approach. He did not growl. He did not attack. Yuna raised her hand and pressed it against the energy barrier. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then, slowly, gently, Vex lowered his massive head and pressed it against the other side of the barrier. Exactly where her hand was, the energy crackled between them. But neither of them moved. Yuna whispered, "I see you." "Vex, I understand you." The Shadow Fang made a soft sound. Like a sigh. Tomorrow was the bonding ceremony. Tomorrow, everyone would watch her fail with her weak little driftworm. Tomorrow, they would laugh at her again. But Yuna was not worried anymore. She had found something in this dark basement. Something no one else had ever found. She had found a friend. The Proving Grounds arena was filled with thousands of spectators. Officers, soldiers, politicians, and journalists from across the galaxy had come to watch the bonding ceremony. Giant screens showed every angle of the arena floor. Cameras floated through the air, capturing everything. In the center of the viewing platform sat the most important guests. Coalition High Command had sent their top leaders. Among them was Admiral Seong, a legendary figure in the military. He was human, one of the few who had ever risen to such a high position. His face was calm, but his eyes watched everything with sharp attention. Down in the waiting area, the recruits prepared their beasts. Kira stood proudly beside her Thornback, polishing its armor plates. Torek checked the chains on his siege crawler, making sure they would hold until his turn. Other recruits talked nervously among themselves. Yuna sat alone in a corner. On her lap was the small driftworm, sleeping peacefully. "Look at her," Kira whispered to Torek. "Still pretending she belongs here. This will be fun to watch." Torek grunted. "The human will be gone by tonight." Commander Rovik walked through the waiting area, inspecting each recruit and their beast. When he reached Yuna, he stopped and looked down at her with disgust. "Are you ready to embarrass yourself, human?" he asked. Yuna looked up at him. "I am ready, Commander." Rovik laughed. "Good. I have made sure you will perform last. That way, everyone will see your failure before they leave." He walked away, still laughing. The ceremony began. One by one, recruits entered the arena with their beasts. They demonstrated their bond through various tests. Some showed obedience commands. Some showed combat techniques. Some showed tracking abilities. Kira performed brilliantly. Her Thornback followed her every command perfectly. The crowd cheered. Commander Rovik nodded with approval. Tarek was even more impressive. His siege crawler destroyed practice targets with ease. The ground shook with every step the massive creature took. The crowd roared with excitement. More recruits performed. More cheers filled the arena. The ceremony was going perfectly. Finally, it was Yuna's turn. And now, the announcer said, our final recruit. The first human ever accepted into the Beast Handler division. Yuna Park. The arena went quiet. People leaned forward in their seats, curious to see the strange human and her pathetic beast. Yuna walked out onto the arena floor. In her arms was the driftworm, still small and weak-looking. The crowd began to murmur with confusion and disappointment. Is that her beast? Someone asked. A driftworm? That is worthless. What a waste of time. Yuna placed the driftworm on the ground. It moved slowly, looking around with its dull eyes. It did not look impressive. It did not look dangerous. It looked like exactly what it was. A creature nobody wanted. In the viewing platform, Admiral Xiang frowned slightly. He had heard rumors about this human recruit. He had expected something more. Commander Rovik stepped forward with a microphone. As you can see, the human has bonded with the weakest beast available. This is proof that humans do not belong in the Beast Handler division. I move to formally expel Recruit Park from the... He never finished his sentence. The ground shook. At first, people thought it was an earthquake. But the shaking continued, getting stronger and stronger. Then the alarms started. Red lights flashed throughout the arena. Warning sirens screamed. A mechanical voice announced, Containment breach. Level 5. Shadowfang has escaped. All personnel evacuate immediately. Panic exploded through the crowd. People screamed and ran for the exits. Officers shouted commands. Soldiers grabbed their weapons. In the waiting area, beasts went wild with fear. Kira's Thornback threw her off its back and ran. Torek's siege crawler broke its chains and fled through a wall. Other creatures roared and crashed through barriers. The arena descended into chaos. Then Shadowfang arrived. It burst through the main entrance like a living nightmare. 12 feet of black scales and blade-like claws. 6 red eyes burning with fury. It moved faster than anything that Sai should be able to move, destroying everything in its path. Soldiers opened fire. Their weapons did nothing. The Shadowfang was covered in scales harder than steel. Bullets bounced off like raindrops. Everyone run! Someone screamed. People stampeded toward the exits. Officers tried to maintain order, but failed. Even Commander Rovik turned and fled, his face pale with terror. In the middle of the arena, Yuna stood alone. She did not run. The Shadowfang saw her. It stopped destroying things and turned its 6 eyes directly on her. A deep growl rumbled from its throat. Yuna! Kira screamed from somewhere in the crowd. Run! It will kill you! But Yuna did not run. She took a step forward. The Shadowfang took a step forward. Everyone still watching held their breath. They were about to see a human girl get torn apart by the most dangerous creature in the galaxy. Yuna raised her right hand slowly. She showed her open palm, just like she had done so many times in that dark basement. Vex, she said calmly. Her voice somehow carried across the entire arena. Enough! The Shadowfang froze. Its growling stopped. Its claws lowered. Its 6 eyes blinked once, then twice. Then, slowly, impossibly, the massive creature lowered its body to the ground. It pressed its belly against the arena floor and laid its huge head at Yuna's feet. Complete silence. Nobody moved. Nobody breathed. Nobody could believe what they were seeing. Yuna walked forward and gently placed her hand on the Shadowfang's snout. The creature made a soft sound, almost like a purr. Good boy, Yuna whispered. I knew you would come for me. In the viewing platform, Admiral Xiang slowly rose from his seat. His eyes were wide with shock. His hands gripped the railing in front of him. He spoke into the silence, his voice carrying across the arena through the speakers. In 400 years of the Beast Handler Division, no species has ever bonded with a Shadowfang. Every attempt has ended in death. It was believed to be impossible. He paused, staring at the tiny human girl and the monster kneeling before her. Until today, the arena remained silent for another long moment. Then, slowly, someone started clapping. Then another person. Then another dot within seconds. The entire arena was filled with thunderous applause. Kira stood frozen, her mouth hanging open. Torek stared with disbelief. Even the officers who had mocked Yuna were clapping, their faces showing nothing but amazement. Commander Rovik stood alone near the exit, his face twisted with shock and anger. This was not supposed to happen. The human was supposed to fail. She was supposed to be humiliated and expelled. Instead, she had done the impossible. Yuna looked up at the cheering crowd. She felt Vex's warm breath against her hand. She heard his soft growling, almost like he was laughing. She was still the smallest person in the arena. She was still the weakest physically. She was still human. But at that moment, standing beside her impossible beast, she felt stronger than she had ever felt in her entire life. Admiral Seong was already walking toward the arena floor. He had questions. Many questions. And Unipark had answers that would change the galaxy forever. Word spread across the galaxy like fire. A human had bonded with a Shadowfang. Reporters wanted interviews. Scientists wanted to study the bond. Military leaders wanted to know how it was done. Yuna became famous overnight. Her face appeared on news screens across hundreds of planets. People who had never seen a human before now knew her name. But fame brought enemies. Commander Rovik could not accept what had happened. He had spent years building his reputation. He had mocked humans at every opportunity. And now, a tiny human girl had made him look like a fool in front of the entire galaxy. He wanted revenge. 3 weeks after the bonding ceremony, Rovik called Yuna to his office. "You have been assigned to a special mission," he said. His voice was calm, but his yellow eyes burned with hidden hatred. A reconnaissance operation on planet Korin. Yuna felt a chill run down her spine. Korin was the deadliest planet in known space. It was where military beasts came from. It was also currently controlled by a rogue faction called the Eintide, a group of rebels who had broken away from the coalition and declared war on everyone. A reconnaissance mission to Korin requires a full combat team, Yuna said carefully. Not a small squad. Rovik smiled. You will have a squad. 4 other recruits will accompany you. Your mission is simple. Gather intelligence on Irontide movements and return. Nothing more. Yuna knew this was a trap. Reconnaissance missions to Korin had a survival rate of less than 20%. Rovik was sending her to die, but she could not refuse. Refusing a direct order would get her expelled. "I understand, Commander," she said. "When do we leave?" "Tomorrow morning." Rovik's smile grew wider. "Good luck, human. You will need it." The next morning, Yuna met her squad at the transport ship. There were 4 others: Kira, Torek, a nervous human male named Minho who worked in communications, and a calm Nixari female named Dara who served as a medic. Kira looked angry. "I cannot believe Rovik put us on this suicide mission." Torek grunted in agreement. "He wants us dead. All of us. Not just the human." Minho was shaking. "I have never been in combat before. I just handle radio signals." Dara checked her medical supplies calmly. "We should focus on the mission. Complaining will not help us survive." Yuna walked onto the ship last. Beside her, Vex moved silently, his massive body barely fitting through the transport door. The other squad members stepped back instinctively when the Shadowfang passed them. The flight to Corrin took 6 hours. During that time, the squad sat in uncomfortable silence. Kira kept glancing at Vex, her fear obvious despite her attempts to hide it. Torek stared at the wall, lost in thought. Minho checked his communication equipment over and over. Dara simply closed her eyes and rested. Yuna sat beside Vex, her hand resting on his scales. She could feel his heartbeat, slow and steady. He was calm because she was calm. The transport landed in a dense jungle. The air was thick and hot. Strange sounds came from every direction. The trees were massive, blocking most of the sunlight. "We move in pairs," Yuna said quietly. "Kira with Torek, Minho with Dara. I will take point with Vex." Kira started to argue, then stopped. She looked at the dangerous jungle around them, then at the Shadowfang standing beside the tiny human. For the first time in her life, Kira decided to follow a human's orders. They moved through the jungle for 3 hours. Vex led the way, his 6 eyes scanning everything. His senses were far superior to any equipment the squad carried. Twice, he stopped and growled softly. Both times, Yuna made the squad hide. Both times, Iron-Tide patrols passed within meters of their position without seeing them dot. Then disaster struck. They walked into an ambush. Energy bolts exploded from the trees all around them. Iron-Tide soldiers poured out of hidden positions, weapons firing. A massive explosion knocked the squad off their feet. Their transport ship, hidden a kilometer away, erupted in flames. Someone had found it and destroyed it. "We are trapped," Minho screamed. Torek charged at the nearest enemies, his huge body absorbing gunfire. He crushed 2 soldiers with his bare hands before a blast caught him in the leg. He fell with a roar of pain. Kira tried to command her Thornback, but it was too slow. Bullets tore through its armor. The beast fell dead, and Kira barely rolled away before it crushed her. "Fall back," Yuna shouted. "Behind those rocks." The squad retreated to a small rocky area. Torek was dragged by Kira, leaving a trail of blood. Minho fumbled with his radio, trying to send a distress signal. Dara immediately began treating Torek's wound. Iron-Tide soldiers surrounded them. There were at least 50 of them. They moved closer, knowing the squad had nowhere to go. "Surrender," an enemy commander shouted. "You are outnumbered. Drop your weapons, and maybe we will let you live." Kira looked at Yuna. Her face was covered in dirt and blood. Her Thornback was dead. She had nothing left. "What do we do?" she asked. Her voice was shaking. This was not mockery. This was genuine fear. Yuna looked at the approaching enemy. Then she looked at Vex, who stood beside her like a living shadow. "Minho," she said calmly, "keep trying to send that signal. Dara, stabilize Torek as best you can. Kira, protect them. What about you?" Kira asked. Yuna smiled slightly. "I am going to introduce our enemies to Vex." She stepped out from behind the rocks. Vex followed her. The Iron-Tide soldiers laughed when they saw the small human girl. "Look at this," one of them shouted. "They sent a child to fight us." Then they saw what was standing behind her. The laughter stopped. Vex moved like darkness given form. He was among the enemy soldiers before they could react. Claws sliced through armor like paper. Teeth crushed bones like dry sticks. Screams filled the jungle, but Vex was not a mindless killer. He responded to Yuna's every gesture, every quiet command. He protected allies and destroyed enemies with perfect precision. Not once did he harm anyone on his own side. The Iron-Tide commander called for reinforcements. A transport landed nearby, and from it emerged their own apex predator, a Goreclaw, a massive beast with 4 arms and a mouth that could swallow a person whole. The Goreclaw charged at Vex. The battle lasted less than 30 seconds. Vex was faster, smarter, and far more deadly. He tore the Goreclaw apart piece by piece while Yuna watched calmly. When it was over, the remaining iron-tied soldiers fled into the jungle. They had lost everything, including their will to fight. Silence returned to the battlefield. Yuna walked among the destruction, checking for survivors. She found none among the enemy. She did not feel sorry for them. They had tried to kill her squad. Behind her, Kira emerged from the rocks. Her eyes were wide with disbelief. You saved us," she whispered. To Rek, barely conscious, managed to speak. "Human, I was wrong about you. I was wrong about all humans." Even Dara, who rarely showed emotion, nodded with respect. Minho's voice crackled from the radio. "I got through. Coalition rescue is on the way." An hour later, a rescue shuttle descended through the smoke and fire. When the door opened, Admiral Seong himself stepped out. He surveyed the battlefield. Dead enemies. Destroyed equipment. A Goreclaw torn to pieces. And in the middle of it all, a tiny human girl standing beside a Shadowfang, both covered in blood but unharmed. "Lieutenant Park," Admiral Seong said slowly, "we need to talk about your future." Yuna straightened her back and saluted. "Yes, Admiral." Seong looked at Vex, who stared back with all 6 of his eyes. The Shadowfang did not growl. He simply watched, waiting for his human to tell him what to do. "Fascinating," Seong murmured. "Absolutely fascinating." He turned and walked back toward the shuttle. "Come with me. All of you. I believe the Coalition needs to reconsider how we view humanity." Kira helped Tarek walk. Dara carried the medical supplies. Minho followed nervously behind them. Yuna walked last, Vex at her side. She looked back at the jungle one final time. Commander Rovik had sent her here to die. Instead, she had become something more. 1 year had passed since the mission on Koran. The galaxy had changed. Yuna stood at the window of her office at Coalition High Command, looking out at the stars. She was no longer a recruit. She was no longer mocked or dismissed. She was Lieutenant Commander Yuna Park, the first Apex handler in Coalition history. The title had been created specifically for her. Behind her, the door opened. Kira walked in, wearing the uniform of a Coalition officer. She saluted sharply. "The new recruits have arrived, Commander," Kira reported. 32 humans from Earth. They are waiting in the training hall." Yuna turned around. She was still small. She was still quiet. But there was a confidence in her eyes that had not been there before. "Thank you, Kira. I will address them shortly." Kira nodded. She did not leave immediately. Instead, she stood there, looking at her commander with something like admiration. "I still remember," Kira said softly. "I remember calling you weak, saying you did not belong. I was such a fool." Yuna walked over to her and placed a hand on her shoulder. "You were not a fool. You were taught wrong. Now we teach something better." Kira smiled. It was strange to see a Veltari smile, but she had learned the expression from spending time with humans. "The recruits are lucky to have you," Kira said. "I will prepare the training beasts." She saluted again and left. Yuna walked to the training hall. Inside, 32 young humans stood in nervous rows. They were all from Earth, all chosen for a special program. They had been told they would learn to handle military beasts using a new method. They had not been told who their teacher was. When Yuna entered the room, whispers spread through the crowd. "Is that her? The one who bonded a Shadowfang? She is so small." Yuna stood at the front of the room and waited for silence. It came quickly. "My name is Yuna Park," she said. 1 year ago, I was the first human accepted into the Beast Handler Division. I was given the weakest beast. I was told I would fail. I was sent on a mission designed to kill me." She paused, letting her words sink in. "I did not fail. I did not die. And now, I'm going to teach you the secret that changed everything." She walked among the recruits, looking at each face. Other species believe that strength comes from dominance. They think that to control a beast, you must break its will. You must hurt it until it obeys. You must make it fear you. She stopped and turned to face them all. They are wrong. The recruits listened in perfect silence. Humans have something other species do not understand, Una continued. We have empathy. We can feel what others feel. We can connect with creatures in ways that seem impossible to aliens. This is not weakness. This is our greatest strength. She raised her hand, and a side door opened. Vex walked into the training hall. Some recruits gasped. Others stepped back in fear. A few looked like they might faint. The Shadowfang was even more terrifying up close than in the videos they had seen, but Vex did not attack. He walked calmly to Una's side and sat down like an obedient pet. His 6 eyes looked at the recruits with curiosity, not hunger. "This is Vex," Una said. "Everyone told me he was impossible to tame. They said he was a mindless killer. They were wrong." She scratched behind one of Vex's ear ridges. The massive creature made a sound that was almost like purring. Vex was not mindless. He was lonely. He was scared. He had been hurt so many times that he attacked everyone who came near him. All he needed was someone who treated him with respect. Someone who showed him kindness instead of cruelty. She looked at the recruits with intensity. "This is what you will learn. Not how to dominate beasts, but how to understand them. Not how to break their will, but how to earn their trust. This is the human way, and it works better than anything else in the galaxy." The training lasted for months. Una taught the recruits everything she knew. She showed them how to read a creature's body language. She taught them how to approach dangerous beasts without triggering aggression. She explained how patience and consistency could build bonds that violence never could. Not all recruits succeeded. Some could not overcome their fear. Some did not have the patience. But many of them did succeed, and they bonded with beasts that other species had failed to control. Humans were no longer mocked. They were sought after. Military commanders across the galaxy requested human beast handlers for their units. Planets that had never cared about Earth suddenly wanted to establish diplomatic relations. Humanity's reputation was changing. During this time, Commander Rovik faced a military tribunal. The investigation into the Koran mission had revealed everything. He had deliberately sent Una's squad into enemy territory without proper support. He had hoped they would all die, so he would not have to admit he was wrong about humans. The tribunal found him guilty of attempted murder and abuse of command. He was stripped of his rank and sent to a prison colony on the outer rim of the galaxy. Una did not attend the tribunal. She did not care about revenge. Rovik had tried to destroy her, and he had failed. That was enough. Tarek had recovered from his injuries. He became an advocate for human integration, traveling to different planets to speak about his experiences. The massive Gorvan, who had once refused to train with a human, now called Una his closest friend. Minho was promoted to lead communications for the new Shadowfang division. His nervousness had faded over the year. He had learned that courage was not about being fearless. It was about being afraid and doing the right thing anyway. Dara returned to medical research. She was developing new treatments based on Shadowfang biology. She still sent messages to Una sometimes, sharing her discoveries, and Kira never left Una's side. She served as second in command of the Shadowfang division, fierce and loyal to the small human who had changed her life. Then, one day, a new threat appeared. Admiral Sion called an emergency meeting with all high-ranking officers. His face was grave. "A hive fleet has been detected approaching Coalition space," he announced. "They are an unknown species from beyond our borders. Their bioweapons are unlike anything we have seen. Conventional tactics will not work against them. He turned to face Yuna directly. Lieutenant Commander Park, your Shadowfang division is our best hope. Can your handlers and their beast fight this enemy? Every eye in the room turned to the small human woman. Yuna thought about her recruits. She thought about the bonds they had formed with their beasts. She thought about everything she had learned in the past year. Then she thought about Vex, waiting for her back in their quarters. He would follow her anywhere. He would fight any enemy. He would die for her without hesitation, and she would do the same for him. Admiral, Yuna said quietly, my division is ready. Xiang nodded slowly. Then the Coalition's fate is in your hands. That night, Yuna stood at her window again, watching the stars. Somewhere out there, in the darkness of space, an enemy was coming. An enemy that threatened everything she cared about. Vex pressed against her side, his warm body a comforting presence. He made a soft rumbling sound, sensing her thoughts. Are you scared? Yuna asked him quietly. Vex looked at her with his 6 red eyes. He did not speak, but she understood him anyway. He was not scared. As long as she was with him, he feared nothing. Yuna smiled and placed her hand on his snout. She remembered arriving at Station Orion 7, alone and mocked. She remembered Commander Rovik calling her fragile prey. She remembered the laughter, the insults, the cruelty. They had called humans weak. They had called humans soft. They had said humans did not belong among the warriors of the galaxy. They were wrong. Yuna looked out at the approaching darkness. She felt Vex's heartbeat against her palm. She heard her squad preparing for battle in the halls behind her. They called us weak, she said softly to the stars. They called us prey. She turned away from the window, her monster standing ready beside her. They were wrong. The war was coming, and humanity would be ready. The end.